After Burma's historic vote, all signs point to an historic result. The initial tally has Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy unseating, among others, the current Speaker of Parliament. Will the NLD have enough seats to pick the next president? With the constitution skewed in favor of the military, would the junta go quietly after pulling the strings for nearly 7 decades? We're going to see how the opening up of a nation that borders India, China, and Thailand is already well underway. But are the conditions ripe for the final lifting of foreign sanctions? It's not just the junta's next move that's at stake. The end of decades of isolation has included a backlash against minorities, particularly Muslims, swaying decisions even inside Aung San Suu Kyi's party. Bolstered by her probable win, will the Nobel Peace Laureate stand up to Buddhist hardliners? And what role for a woman who, under the current rules, is ineligible to become president, but who has become, of course, the face of democratic struggle? Today, in the France 24 debate, no going back to Burma. With us from London, HNIN campaign officer at Burma Campaign UK and daughter of KHIN, one of the Generation 88 student leaders. Thank you so much for joining us. We also want to thank David CAMROUX of Sciences Po's International Research Center for joining us once again. And from London, KHIN of the Burmese Rohingya organization UK. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. Initial results give a clean sweep in Rangoon, 44 of the 45 lower house seats, all 12 of the upper house seats in Burma's largest city, going to the National League for Democracy. Similar stories with big wins in 3 other states. And even though the NLD leader, even though it's looking like a landslide, the NLD leader insists it's too early to celebrate. Vendors, though, already hawking red "We won" T-shirts.
This election is properly free and fair, not like 5 years ago. It's much more enjoyable. We can choose whoever we want to vote for, so I'm really happy.
I'm absolutely thrilled about it. I can choose the party that can bring change to our nation. That's why I'm so happy.
I really want to know the results. I couldn't sleep the whole night. Not just me, but my friends and colleagues. They're waiting for updates on results via Facebook.
All right, that voter saying she hasn't been able to sleep. Voters weren't able to, who said they didn't sleep so that they could get online to vote, and then who aren't sleeping because they're staying up late to listen to results, David CAMROUX.
Yes, I mean, it's a little bit unfortunate we're treating this as if it's a presidential elections. It is there are legislative elections in a federal system. You weren't quite correct in saying there were 4 states. In fact, there are 14 regions. 7 of them are states. That is, they're the areas in which minority ethnic groups are predominant. And 7 of them were previously called divisions, and they're called regions, in which essentially are in the Burma heartland, the 70% of the population, 68% of the population who are ethnically Burma and Buddhist. So, in order to really assess the results, we need to receive the results from those peripheral areas, from the states, and to see whether the electors there voted for the National League for Democracy, which was the case. So it would appear in the Burma heartland, or whether they voted for ethnic political parties who they may feel could better defend their interests. Remember, there were over 90 political parties running during these elections.
All right, here's some of the results. I'll read them off to you. These are provisional results. All 38 seats in Ayeyarwady State. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Ayeyarwady region.
That's listed as a state on this agency wire dispatch. All but 1 of the 40 in Bago, yep. 11 out of 19 lower house seats, and all 10 upper house seats in Mon State. What do those results tell you?
Well, except for Mon State, which is an ethnic majority state, the others are essentially Burma areas. And so what it confirms is this across the board, this landslide for the National League for Democracy in those areas. The preliminary figures I saw for Rakhine State, where there is the question of the Rohingyas. Had the Rakhine National Party, an ethnic Buddhist party there, winning quite a number of seats, but I haven't seen the definitive results there. So I'm perhaps because I'm too much of a political scientist, I'm a little bit prudent to comment on the results. Although clearly this is an historic election. It is both an historic election and a step along the road, and there are many steps ahead of us to a democratic transition in Myanmar.
KHIN, is it too early to draw conclusions from the vote?
I think it is too early to say, but as far as what we can see here, like the result, NLD will be landslide victory this election. As we can see in our Rakhine state, ANP is leading, and other parts, except Shan state, NLD is also leading too. This is a very good form of NLD position when we look at these results. But the point here is, next step forward, NLD can govern the country. Still, in my opinion, military is under of the control. If you look at the constitution, key ministers of border affairs, defense minister, and home minister will be appointed by, military. So the sensitive issue in Burma is still there, and we are a bit worried that, how NLD will control the country, because key ministers will be appointed by military, and that many decades, military control the country. So the point is how NLD will overcome on that. This is a question.
It is a big question.
Particularly as a Rohingya.
It is a big question, and let me just put that to David CAMROUX at this point. What is it? The defense minister, home affairs, interior, they all have to be appointed by the military.
Yes, and I think also the Ministry for the borderland security. So clearly the military is keeping, they've got the 25% of seats. They have these key ministries, and they also have a provision in the constitution where the commander-in-chief of the military can intervene in the time of national emergency. So they've already sort of legislated, so to speak, to legalize an eventual coup d'etat should they so desire further on. That being said, I think that first of all, the military is divided. An interesting person is Tan Shwe, the former Speaker of the lower house of parliament, who lost his seat and who'd been pushed out of the leadership of the USDP, the Union Solidarity and Development Party, but who, one of the reasons he was pushed out was he was becoming quite friendly with Aung San Suu Kyi. He actually had a program, and his program actually kind of resembles a little bit that of the National League for Democracy. So he's one of the potential presidential candidates. The present president, Thein Sein, hasn't sort of ruled out running again. And the NLD hasn't said who will be their candidate.
Because that's important. Parliament is, it's Parliament that votes on the president.
Yes.
And if the trend continues with the other states, we don't have yet all the votes, obviously, it would be, it could be the NLD that could be in the driver's seat to
if they get the 70% of all of the seats. The way that the electoral districts are carved out gives greater representation, actually, to these peripheral areas. Each of the 14 states, regions, has 12 members of the upper house, a bit like the American system. So, there is a weighting that may be favorable to the military, even if they do lose seats, to be able to maintain, less to the 1/3 seats that they need to win. The question is going to be in the next months is what sort of coalition is going to govern Myanmar.
All right. HNIN joins us from London, campaign officer at Burma Campaign UK. Thanks for being with us at the outset of the show. We heard one voter talking about sleep deprivation, staying up late to listen to results. Is that something you've been experiencing from the UK capital?
Yes, I've been reading, a lot of my friends' updates on Facebook, and I've been following it very closely. And it's a very historical and a very exciting moment for us. But of course, at the same time, I've been talking to my friends, and they are saying, we need to be realistic about it. It's because, this is just a tiny step, and we're not going to have a genuine democracy tomorrow just because NLD win the election. So we are very realistic about it. At the same time, we are quite excited about it.
So keeping a lid on emotions, is that because of what was witnessed in 1990 when the NLD won the election and then the military stepped in and suspended the process and threw activists into jail or put them under house arrest?
Well, it mainly because, because of the 2008 Constitution. The army designed the Constitution to make sure that they keep the power, whoever wins the election. So they know that NLD is very popular and Aung San Suu Kyi is very popular, so they know that they're going to lose the election. So that to keep the power, they put the Constitution there to make sure that they said, whoever wins the election, army still have the ultimate control of the country, and human rights abuses will continue. And NLD have a very limited power to stop those human rights violations in the country.
All right. One thing is certain. We were just talking about who the next president will be. Parliament will be appointing it. One person it won't be is Aung San Suu Kyi herself. The Constitution in it has a provision that if your children are foreign nationals, hers have British passports, you cannot be president. She surprised many last Thursday when asked about how she'd feel about only being, say, a prime minister.
Who said I'm going to be the prime minister? The prime minister is below the president. I've said I'm going to be above the president. How? Oh, I've already made plans.
What does she mean there when she says she's going to be above the president?
It means maybe she'll play a sort of Sonia Gandhi role where, it may mean that the president will be her mouthpiece. I mean, one of the potential candidates is the chairman of her party, who's 89 years old and doesn't want to be the candidate, but is being talked about as the candidate. To kind of be the power behind the throne, maybe even the possibility of pushing for constitutional change, depending on how many seats they do win.
HNIN, what do you see as the role for Aung San Suu Kyi should that landslide be confirmed?
Yes, I think a lot of people, when they are voting for NLD, they are voting for Aung San Suu Kyi because, they believe that she is an icon of hope, an icon of freedom. So when she says she's above the president, maybe she means that she's going to be, she's going to advise and she's going to be making decisions behind the president. So it will make things a lot complicated and a lot difficult because, we need a lot of things to be changed in the country. And if there are two people trying to decide what kind of decision should be made, it will make things a lot of difficult. But on the other hand, like army and the military would be very happy about it because they want to see NLD struggle and they want to see NLD being embarrassed about things. So it will lead us to a very difficult and complicated situations.
KHIN, your thoughts? What do you see? How will Aung San Suu Kyi play this?
I think that she just makes sure to get confident to the public, where most of the, military people are playing, something different way that Aung San Suu Kyi does not have a key role and she will not be in power. So something to divert the attention to support regarding on supporting to Aung San Suu Kyi. So I think that is a kind of role military was playing, and Aung San Suu Kyi have to say that point that to give the confidence to the public because as HNIN have just mentioned, she is an icon for Burma, an icon of hope, of freedom in Burma. So that is the point, I think, exactly why she's saying above the president.
David CAMROUX.
One of the developments that makes me a little optimistic is that the military seems to be divided. There are those like HNIN, but others who found it much more worthwhile to be a politician than to continue wearing their uniforms. There are the tycoons, the cronies, who are benefiting from the opening up of the Myanmar economy and who wish for the democratic process to continue because they know that's a sine qua non for foreign investment and for foreign development aid. So, you know, she can play on the self-interest of some of those who are in the former regime and perhaps count on those sorts of divisions in the military.
But do you see what HNIN is describing, that we could have a scenario where the military will love having perhaps a rivalry at the top among the civilians?
I think that what we're hopefully looking forward to is some kind of coalition government involving not just members of the NLD, but even people from the ethnic minority parties and those even from the former military government. The important thing in a democratic transition is that there needs to be a broad coalition where everybody's, in a sense, stakeholders in that transition, which sometimes means having to include some rather nasty people from the past, but that may be the price to be paid for the transition.
HNIN, do you agree?
Yes, I think, you know, NLD, if they want to be in a government, they need to have a coalition. So they are trying to work together with the ethnic parties. But at the same time, when we talk about democracy and when we talk about the democratic transition, for this election, a lot of people were excluded from the process. And, you know, around 20% of the population were excluded. And there were only 28 Muslim candidates, and none of the candidates were selected to be in the parliament. So, you know, how could it be a democratic process, and how could it be a democracy or transition to democracy when people were excluded from the whole process? So, you know, we need to be realistic about it. It's not, we are not turning and we are not going towards, you know, transition towards genuine democracy just because this election happened.
It hasn't been the case, and we know that your own father was one of the so-called Generation 88 student leaders. He himself, though, was not a candidate.
Yes, so the 88 generation student group, 21 of the student leaders, they applied for a candidacy with NLD, and all but one were rejected. We don't know the exact reason why they were rejected, but, you know, some of the NLD officials came out and said they have a policy of not having Muslim candidates in their, you know, campaign, which is really appalling. But now what they can do is, if they form a government, they can show their commitment to, you know, bring about equality in the country by appointing Muslim ministers in the government. It's appalling that there is no Muslim, you know, in parliament. It will be even worse if there are no Muslims in government.
We're going to pick up on that point when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.